Ready to go. Perfect. Everyone hot to trot? Great. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Happy Monday. I will call this meeting of the Cumberland Town Council on Monday, September 23rd, 2024 to order. First up is the approval of minutes from the September 9th, 2024 meeting. I will give you a motion. I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Andrew's got it.
All right, Andrew, is there any discussion on the motion? No. All those in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. All right. Next up, we have the manager's report. Mr. Bolduc, tell us what's happening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a couple items, but before I bore you with my stuff, I am going to punt over to Fire Department personnel. Chief Small and Deputy Chief Turcott are here tonight to introduce a new paramedic firefighter and employee on the department.
Thanks.
Thanks, boss.
Swearing in one of our new paramedics, Brad Chicoine. I'm just going to read a little bio about him. He's board-certified critical care flight paramedic with 20-plus years of paramedic firefighter experience. Previously, he has served EMS coordinator for the City of Saco, director of EMS for the City of Auburn, Chief of Operations, of Kennebunkport EMS, and presidential medical aide for George H.W. Bush. Pretty impressive. He has a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing and works as an ICU and ED nurse at Central Maine Medical Center, as well as a pediatric nurse at Camp Sunshine. He lives in Windham with his wife Kelly of 19 years, daughter Piper, who is a high school senior, son Gage, who is a high school sophomore, and one-year-old dog named Tilly. When he is not working in healthcare, Brad enjoys teaching at Southern Maine Community College and coaching Windham youth sports. Recently, he and his family also joined the Grateful Dog Rescue of Maine and now foster rescued canines from down south. Welcome aboard. But just a couple things. It's very rewarding when we have a new employee come to Cumberland. It's the big city of Cumberland, and with the gentleman with his experience, we certainly are on the benefiting side of what he's done, and he's already performing well and above what our expectations are. So you'll be sworn in now by Jen and be stabbed with the
Do you, Brad Chicoine, swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and of this state, so long as you shall continue a citizen thereof, and that you will faithfully discharge, to the best of your abilities, the duties incumbent on you as a paramedic/firefighter for the Town of Cumberland Fire Department, according to the Constitution and laws of the state?
I do.
Congratulations. Welcome aboard.
Welcome, Brad. All right, Chris, what else do you have for us?
Just a couple of quick things. Kind of a public service announcement from our communications director, Whitney. And if I mess this up, she'll let me know because she's sitting in the back. But we have a new resident open house, October 8th, here in the council chambers from 6 to 8. It's for new residents, but we're also inviting long-term residents this year. There'll be representatives from all the departments here to answer questions. There'll be representatives from the elected officials, boards and committees. And we have a lot of new employees, including a new town manager, and to let everyone get to know him. One of the big things we're doing this year is we're also going to open it up for absentee voting that night as well. So you can come in, chat, have a snack, and absentee vote while you're here. So, again, that's on October 8th from 6 to 8 here in the council chambers. One other small thing, the manager's been reporting to you since August about our paving program and planning our paving program starting in mid-August, 1st of September. That's been delayed. I think a good portion of our paving program this year is going to be pushed into the spring. We had an early wet spring. Our paving company had some staffing issues, some breakdowns, the normal stuff. So our contract is good for a year. So we usually sign on from June 30th, and the contract goes into July 1st. So I think some of the paving will be done this fall, but a majority will be completed in the spring. We'll start sending out letters to residents because we're getting calls asking when the paving's going to be done. So we'll get some letters out once we get some definitive answers of where they're going to be in town. And that's all I have.
Super. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Chris, I got an email from MDOT and talking about a culvert replacement. Is that down on the Wind Road dip, or is that the one just below Wind Road on Route 9?
Just below Wind Road on Route 9. It's actually a bridge that's there that they're going to be replacing next year, right by the boat place, Hallett Sales. It's right there in that gully.
Right, okay.
Yep.
They call that a bridge.
It is a bridge, actually. It's not a culvert, it's actually a bridge. If you climb down there, you'll see it's a bridge. So it's been a big project for them for the past 3 years. We had a pre-construction meeting this spring, and there'll be some more public announcements coming out probably late this winter, because it's going to be a pretty big detour for a period of time. We've had the school involved and the public safety involved to give everyone a heads up of what that would be.
Thanks.
Cool. The more you know. All right, thanks so much, Chris, for that. Next up, we have public discussion. Public discussion is for comments on items, rather, that are not on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Rebuttal comments will be limited to 2 minutes. Public discussion topics may be brought up again under new business for further council discussion. Is there anyone here who would like to come up as part of public comment? I think our former councilor, Story King, had her arm up first, and she's close to the podium. So Shirley, over to you.
Very quick, just a public service announcement. The Friends of Prince Memorial Library have started their annual drive for funds, and their book sale begins in less than a month. It starts October 17th, and it goes until October 22nd, which is the Tuesday after they regroup and see all what they have left at their book sale. So I encourage you, if you are not signed up for the Prince Memorial Library newsletter, to do it. It's not just a repository of books. They have a library of things. So if you need to aerate your lawn, you can go and get this thing you step on, and it puts holes in your lawn to aerate your lawn. It's very cool. They have a seed library in the spring. So if you are not familiar with our library, please go check out at least their website and try to sign up for their weekly newsletters. There's so much going on. It's really our community center. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other folks want to? Yep, please come on up. If you wouldn't mind just telling us your name and where you live.
Hi, my name is Patty Locke, and I'm with the Cumberland North Yarmouth Alliance. I'm here tonight to let everybody know that we have a special event that we're hosting on October 21st. It's Bring a Guest Night, and it's a fantastic opportunity for people who live in either Cumberland, North Yarmouth to come, learn about what we do and see how you can get involved in giving back to the community. The Lions Club is a really fun group, and it's a pretty low commitment group. We only meet once a month from September to May, and so for people even with a busy schedule, it's doable. The night of October 21st, at the Bring a Guest Night, we are providing a dinner, but it's a great way to come meet everybody and see what we do. So if you're interested in coming, you can go to the Lions Club website, and you can have note that you want to attend, or if you have any questions, you can go right to the chat box and write what your questions are. Just let us know you're coming. So I'm hoping that I get to see everybody on the 21st. That's it.
Thank you, Patty. Would anyone else like to speak as part of public comment?
I'm Elizabeth Valentine. I live in Cumberland. I was reading the Town Crier a few weeks ago. I was quite surprised to find out the town of Cumberland is planning to use glyphosate to treat the invasive Japanese knotweed plants on the right-of-ways in a 5-year plan. Glyphosate, or Roundup, it's not a good substance. It's not benign. There are hundreds of studies being done, and thinking forward, I believe that ultimately it's going to be named a carcinogen. The problem, there's a lot of lag time between the use and ill effects on humans. It's also not easy to study. In 2017, the IARC, or International Agency on Research on Cancer, reported there's a strong evidence that glyphosate is genotoxic. It's statistically significant increased risk of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but there's limited evidence at this time to classify it as a carcinogen. I went through a 135-page report of a scientific review on glyphosate issued this past August of 2024 by the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture, and found quite a few things that were notable. Multiple studies have found significant relationships between glyphosate and diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. There's compelling evidence that glyphosate causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in humans exposed to it. A case control study in Italy found that their people exposed with a 10-year lag had a 4.5 to 12 times elevated risk for follicular lymphoma. A study in Hawaii found females with elevated urinary glyphosate levels had a 4.5 increased risk for developing breast cancer. Studies have found increased oxidative stress biomarkers in farmers exposed to high levels of glyphosate. They found increased markers of DNA damage in other populations exposed to glyphosate. One study found a positive correlation between autism and glyphosate exposure in an agricultural region throughout pregnancy and in the first year of life. And there's been many studies showing positive correlations between Parkinson's disease and glyphosate. Ultimately, I don't think it really makes any sense to use glyphosate to try to control invasive plants. I understand that Japanese knotweed is bad, but increasing what are already high levels of cancer in our community does not seem very forward-thinking at all. My husband and I are healthcare providers in the community, and we witness cancer on a daily basis of all sorts, and we don't really need the Maine Cancer Foundation to tell us. Personally, that means cancer rates are already higher than the national average. I just don't really think that adding to people's health risks by using glyphosate really makes sense, and I feel that potentially in the future things are going to come out about this substance that we're going to be very nervous about. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Is there anyone else that would like to comment as part of public discussion? Okay. So I would like us just to go slightly out of order tonight and move 24-107 up to the first item under legislation and policy. Unless there's any objection from the council, it'd be good to move forward with that. Is everyone okay with that? All righty. So first item on the agenda then is 24-107, to accept a $10,000 donation to the fire department to be used for cancer screening for department personnel. Would love to welcome Lauren Brown and Chief Small.
Before Lauren gets started, Pete Bickmore, as we know, passed away last year from cancer. He was a very good friend of Mike's and myself. Huge loss to the community. He started his public safety career here in Cumberland at the age of 15. I'm not sure how old you guys are, so the 60s, I think. But Pete was instrumental, and you can see what he did for the town of Cumberland and specific to the fire department.
Good evening. Today I'm speaking on behalf of my father, Harold Bickmore, who was a dedicated volunteer firefighter and a member of the Cumberland community. My dad passed away from lung cancer last year, and upon his passing, his wish was to give back to the Cumberland Fire Department, as he had been giving lasting memories and friendships till the very end. My dad's wish for the money was to benefit the men and women who served in this special community. When we learned how the money was going to be used, we were elated and felt confident that our dad would be proud. He would have a small hand in protecting the fire department's health and furthering their future and continuing to do what they love. My dad spent countless hours talking about his fond memories of working as a volunteer firefighter and assured us time and time again that being a firefighter was much more than simply a job. It was being part of a family. We couldn't be more proud of our dad, and we couldn't be more thankful for what the Cumberland Fire Department meant to him. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Did anyone on the council want to, anything to add?
Yeah, I guess I will. Well, thanks, Lauren, for coming in tonight. As you guys know, Pete was my best friend. We grew up in the same street, graduated high school together. We both started Cumberland PD, then we went to Scarborough PD together. I went to state police, and then Pete went to the FBI. His public safety career was unmatched by a lot of people. And when we found out that Pete was sick with cancer, and the guy had never smoked a day in his life, was healthy beyond healthy, worked out every day, and this is what you guys are donating for with their dad's blessing is something that's going to save lives, and it's so important. I can't thank you enough, and I love you.
Just real quickly, what the department is going to be using the money for our cancer screening, which is something we've never done before, but Local 340 as well as the Fire Association, and there's even state funding to help us put towards this program. We've seen a lot of terrible deaths in the fire service from unknown carcinogens. There's just too many to list off. So we're lucky that Pete was thinking of this and left this for us. Pretty scary, but we're going to be on the move to try to make it so other people don't have to suffer like he did. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren, for being here tonight.
I'd like to just make a quick comment also. I knew your grandmother very well. I knew your aunts very well. I knew the whole family very well, including Pete. And, you know, your grandmother set the benchmark for public service. And your father certainly was a quick study in that. And we all are very proud of your father's service in the country, in the locality, and across the state. And, you know, you had a great father, and you come from a great line of family. Thank you.
All right. We are moving on to 24-101 to consider and,
To agree to accept the donation.
oh,
I'll make a motion.
sorry,
Yeah.
thank you so, sorry.
Thank you.
What happens when you get flustered by beautiful things happening in humanity? Sorry.
I'll give you a second, Mike.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all those in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. And thank you again, Lauren, and sorry for my fumble. I'm sure it won't be the first one, or the only one of the night. Okay, now moving along to 24-101 to consider and act on setting the 2025 shellfish license allocations as recommended by the Shellfish Conservation Commission. We had a note from Chief Rumsey that the Shellfish Commission is in talks with the Department of Marine Resources, DMR. So we'd like to table this until November so that they have the opportunity to dot their I's and cross their T's. So if there's a motion on the table to table, I would love that.
I would move to table item 24-101.
Second.
Shellfish license allocations.
A motion and a second.
I'll give you a second, yeah.
And I don't think we're allowed to have discussion on it, so all those in favor, I will call for a vote. Okay, unanimous, Brenda. All right, next up, 24-102, to consider and act on adopting a resolution in support of the Portland to Auburn Rail Corridor proposal for a bicycle and pedestrian trail as outlined by the Portland to Auburn Rail Advisory Council. Two kind of housekeeping items that we were to follow up with prior to our last presentation from Phil Gleason and Sarah Russell, both of whom I think are here. Thank you. The Lansing Conservation Commission, we had asked them to review this proposal and weigh in on that. They've come back with their positive recommendation. And the other item was to look into public access, and we have confirmed that there would be potential public access via Powell Road. And finally, we received dozens and dozens of emails today. I think that we responded to everyone asking if they would like them to be included in the public record, but if for any reason we didn't, and you would like them included in the public record, please let us know, and our amazing Brenda will make that magic happen. So yeah, kind of without further ado, I think that we will go right into public comment on this. Per Article 2, Section 7, there's the opportunity for public comment on every item on the agenda. We'll limit those to 5 minutes per person, but if anyone would like to come up and speak, we're here for you. Mr. Gleason?
I think you folks have probably heard plenty from me on this already, but we tried to respond from the comments that we heard last time to get a little clarity on a couple of things. Let me just reiterate what I think this resolution does and what it does not. It's part of a process that is basically being run by the state through the Department of Transportation. And they are asking all of the municipalities on the 26-point-something mile route to pass resolutions which basically say we support the project. They're not asking for money. They're not defining the project. I think that will come at a much later date. But they want to have as much support generated from the various municipalities as possible. Now, this is a 26.5-mile route from Portland to Auburn. 2.6 miles approximately would go through Cumberland, so I think that makes us actually the smallest segment on the route. Falmouth, Yarmouth, North Yarmouth, Pownell, and some of the other neighbors further north have already adopted resolutions. So we're a little bit behind the curve, but it's not too late. And the resolution is carefully drafted so that it doesn't commit the town to spend any money. There may be a money request from the state at a later date, but we'll wait and see on that. And I expect that any request for local funding would be modest and would involve things like annual trail maintenance and the like. So that's somewhere in the future. Where this project stands at the moment is the Department of Transportation, in order to move forward, needs funding from the legislature. The funding would be a combination, as I understand it, of federal and state funds. And I think there is some hope that a bill will be submitted to the legislature in their January session 2025. And that, if it happens, would sort of kick off the next steps in the project, which would start with, I think, design and site analysis and all of the details of access and what's the trail going to look like, and is it part gravel and part paved, and the like would be dealt with as part of that MDOT process. I've had several conversations with staffers at MDOT to talk about their process. They have assured me that there will be ample opportunities for local input at every step of the way. I take them at face value. I think they want to build community support for whatever this trail ultimately ends up being. I think we're also looking at sort of a long-term thing. If the funding is approved in 2025, that will start a process, as I just mentioned. I'm guessing we are probably at best 2 or 3 years away from seeing anything happen on the ground. That may be optimistic, but it's a long-term process, and it's part of a statewide effort to encourage, non-car transportation alternatives. There was something that sort of happened about a year ago. There's a rail use advisory committee. Cumberland was part of that. It's basically the local communities. Bill Shane actually chaired that committee, and that committee took a vote. I think the numbers were 14 to 10. I'm not sure about that, in favor of what we call an interim trail, which means, there's also a related term called trail until rail. What that means is the option of a rail trail in this same corridor would be preserved. It doesn't mean it will ever get built. And as a matter of fact, all of the numbers that I've seen on putting a passenger rail or a commuter rail in this same corridor, along with the bike and pedestrian trail rather, are big dollars. It's hard for me to imagine that will happen. I know it won't happen in my lifetime. It may happen in the lifetime of some of the folks here, but I think that's a long shot, but the option is preserved.
Hey, Phil, we're gonna, just because there are some other folks, I think, that want to get on the docket
so
as well.
that's a summary. If
Thank you.
anybody has any questions, I'm happy to respond, and I can come back up here, so.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Yep.
Phil was the one who initially presented to us on the Casco Bay Trail. So, thank you, Phil, and if we do have additional questions, we will certainly not hesitate to ask you to come back up. Other folks, I think you may have had your hand up. Did you want to go next?
Thank you, Phil. Phil and I are good friends from bicycling. I'm a cyclist. I live in Cumberland.
Sorry.
My name is Paul Weiss. I live on Blanchard Road, and I was the president of the largest cycling club in Maine for over a decade. I've raced for over 37 years all over the country, 5 national champions, 2 world championships, and ride 2,000 to 7,000 miles every year, more than I drive my car. I've also been an advocate for the Sierra Club, the Maine Rail Transit Coalition, and the Maine Rail Group. I helped write and draft with Governor Baldacci the Maine State Rail Plan. I've been heavily involved with advocacy for transportation for many, many years. Bike trails seem like a nice knee-jerk, great thing to do, and I've ridden miles and miles of them. But in this case, and in the case of the examples across the state of Maine, they are a horrible fiasco that the Department of Transportation, who does zero advocacy for rail, has given the choice by zero choice. There are 0 advocates for rail in the state of Maine. There aren't any paid lobbyists for Maine. There aren't any groups that get private money and public funding for rail advocacy. But there are hundreds, literally, of people that work for dozens of different groups that do advocacy for trails and get money from the DOT, from many volunteer organizations. Why is this such a bad idea? Because you're taking the most highly engineered last corridor left in transportation in the state of Maine and converting it from literally tens of millions of dollars that our governor, past governor, who I personally worked with, purchased through the state of your tax money for transportation rail advocacy. They didn't buy it for an expensive bike path. The amount of economical return on investment in rail is orders of magnitude more than the best bike trail in the United States, and I've ridden hundreds of them. It's really a horrible choice for transportation and for the future of Maine. I can give you examples, literally, of what has happened in the state of Maine, from down East Maine on the Sunrise Trail, or the economy's tanked, and now you have a multi-million-dollar ATV trail made of sand in a public that is impoverished. Zero economic return. This is unique in that we have a line that could be dedicated for passenger service and another line that is privately owned for freight service. That's very important if you understand anything about rail, because you need divided lines. We had over 100 years ago passenger service that went between Portland and Auburn. It was faster than the Maine Turnpike. It was electrified and it ran on hydropower. It was the most modern railroad in modern terms that exists. We are proposing, again, doing just that. And the naysayers that say rail can take years, it can take 2 to 3 years to completely redesign that line, purchase electrified and battery-operated cars to run up and down that line. This project alone could be the largest climate change reduction in the state of Maine. And those are based on numbers of transportation, cars taken off the road, millions of miles not being driven, opening up economic opportunity to dozens of towns and the 2 largest cities in the state of Maine not even connected by passenger rail. This isn't pie in the sky. This can happen. When you engineer railroad beds, they are some of the most highly engineered ground in the state of Maine. They hold tens of thousands of pounds per square foot, and they cost our taxpayer money. They've been around for hundreds of years, and some of the railways are still working from 150 years ago. These are the most highly engineered feet of ground in the state of Maine. And to turn them into a bike path is like buying a grand piano and using it as a coffee table in your living room. It's insane. To allow a small private group of people that want a bike trail, believe me, it's a great thing. I love bike trails. However, this choice is stark. We are literally going to be shooting ourselves in the foot in future generations by destroying the future of transportation. The Biden administration has given more to public transportation, and that money is now being released, and we're now seeing those funding streams being used. It's an enormous amount of it, the most in a complete generation, passenger rail service. So I really think, I hate to, as a bicyclist, to be a naysayer in this, but as a public citizen, I think this is, my opinion is this should be returned to passenger rail service. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Paul. Sure.
Shirley Story King, Shirley Lane. Good evening. I'm here tonight to ask you to not endorse the resolution being requested by Sarah and Phil. I would like to say Phil has been an excellent communicator on this topic, personally offering to meet with neighbors to explain his understanding. A meeting hasn't happened because he's busy or I've been busy, but I have great respect for him and I value his integrity. But Phil's offer did give me an idea. The town council should host a neighborhood meeting and invite all the abutters to share their concerns. I shared a list of some of those concerns, front and back, with a cute little cow on it, with you, a paper copy of that. Neighborhood meetings are a best practice of the Cumberland Town Council and a good way to hear directly from citizens most impacted. It may be efficient to take the easy path and go with the majority and avoid face-to-face. But if you do, you are not respecting those who are being impacted. At the very least, I discourage you from taking action tonight and until you can meet with the abutters. In Cumberland, the Casco Bay Trail includes only 2.6 miles of rail running north-south parallel to 295. It opened in 1848. When Captain Ephraim Sturdivant, who named Cumberland, still owned the land. And Portland to Yarmouth was the first part constructed of a line which was to become part of America's first international railroad. I've learned a lot by doing my homework on this. You hear a lot today with regards to government spending and taxation about needs and wants. This may be something many residents want, but no one needs it. And it can have dire consequences to people living along the trail. But how would any decision makers know? They haven't included abutters in the process. Both Route 88 and Route 1 have wide paved shoulders, so this is not a need. Cumberland addressed safety in this transportation corridor already by widening shoulders. Even Middle Road, south of Tuttle Road, has wider shoulders. If asked directly, many people would be in favor of rail to trail, especially if it doesn't increase taxes. I thought it was a good idea until I started learning more about it and listening to my neighbors. However, evidence shows that this is, in large part, a non-issue for Cumberland. Out of 600 plus online comments for the RUAC public hearing, only 42, 7%, identified themselves as from Cumberland, both for and against. Most were from the Bicycle Coalition of Maine, from Auburn to Bodenham to Harpswell to Portland. Out of 63 speakers at the public hearing, 10 were from Cumberland. 4 or 5 were opposed, and 2 in favor are owners of a Portland bike shop. Perhaps you have more important matters than a resolution that can again divide us. Please ask yourself why this is a matter you are taking up, out of respect for Phil, obviously. But what is your intended level of engagement? Is this resolution part of a strategic priority? Is it outlined in an economic plan? Tabling the matter indefinitely would be the most responsible action tonight. Table it until you can meet with the neighbors. I'm happy to have you come for coffee and take you on the Ranger to see the trail. I'll try not to get you stuck and covered with mud like I did Councilor Thorson, but I can't promise the cows won't stand in front of us and delay our tour. That might encourage you. The Town Council's first resolution on this matter was conditional, but the RUAC did not follow our conditions. The sentiment that persuaded us to pass the first resolution was it was better to have a seat at the table than not. Please remember, no abutters in any of the communities were represented, and there was only one elected official, the voice of the people, appointed to the committee, and she rarely attended. And she was from Falmouth, where I don't understand why those citizens aren't enraged. It's from my house to you, from the railroad track, on many of those homes. The committee was made up of people representing businesses and special interest groups or were town employees, squeaky wheels, and people handpicked by the DOT commissioner. Now all that is said about that resolution support was that the town was in favor of the RUAC. Tonight do you want me to finish, or I can hand it to Bob?
Do you want to take your 2 minutes for your rebuttal and then just tack that on?
Sure. Tonight you are being asked for another resolution supporting the recommendation of the RUAC, which was not at all unanimous. You're being asked to pass something that in support of a decision by a committee that was not unanimous. The pushers of this endeavor will not distinguish any special conditions or additions you might add. So please don't fall for that mistake again. Another tidbit you might find interesting is this is not being dealt with at all through the proper channels of the state. Not the DEP nor the Bureau of Parks have weighed in. To do so would require a wetland study. Chenery Brook, which runs adjacent to the proposed trail, is designated shoreland zone. I included pictures in my email to you last night, which shows water along the rail bed and discharge into the brook. At least the move to get our LCC support before coming to you hints that some of my concerns on this matter might be being heard, and I suspect that was Phil. He's a good listener. The Bicycle Coalition and Eastern Trail Organization are massive and very well-funded entities connected to the Casco Bay Trail folks. Their intentions are, most believe, positive, but for landowners and landowners' rights, they have blinders on. I'm in this for the long haul. I'm asking for your help because I do not have a lobbyist, and my opposition is not well-funded. Your decision tonight matters. It matters to me and other people who live along this corridor. We are grossly outnumbered. It matters to the wildlife and health of our brook. If it moves forward, it will have unintended, irreversible consequences. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Would anyone else like to speak? Sure. Just state your name and where you live, please.
Good evening. My name is Joe Comiska. My wife and I have lived on Middle Road for about 40 years. We ask you not to support this rail corridor trail proposal. As an abutter, we will be seriously affected by the creation of the Casco Bay Trail. There are obvious reasons to not proceed with a high-traffic trail route through Cumberland. Tonight, I'll point to several, but the Stop the Casco Bay Trail website at stopcascobaytrail.com outlines many more and supplies the backup documentation for my comments tonight. The Casco Bay Trail Alliance estimates that hundreds of thousands of people will use the Casco Bay Trail each year. At one time, the website claimed 500,000 people would use the trail. They've since removed all usage numbers from their site. Most of that traffic will occur from May to October, which means more than 2,500 people a day will be traveling very close to homes in Cumberland, North Yarmouth, and Falmouth. And Shirley, the reason that you don't hear a lot from Falmouth is the Falmouth residents don't know anything about this. This traffic will have a devastating impact on our quality of life and the abundance of wildlife that currently thrives in the Chenery Brook Shoreland Zone protected area that runs next to the rail line. Property values will be reduced. Contrary to the cookie-cutter economic reports by deep-pocketed trail proponents, property values suffer along residential trails like the one proposed. I don't think you'll find a similar trail that hasn't generated a significant increase in unlawful campsites, property damage, and physical assaults. Who will patrol and who will respond to folks abusing private property? If this is to be state property, where does that liability lie? What are our protections? There is no current public access in Cumberland. How will police or rescue units respond? As mentioned, there is only the potential of public access in Cumberland. How can this benefit our community? Users will have to drive their cars to other towns in order to go green and walk or bike. The Trail Alliance claims the trail will reduce the use of vehicles. This recreational trail would increase vehicle emissions. The Rail Use Advisory Council process that investigated the trail use was flawed. The membership of the council was loaded with special interest groups. There was no input from personal property owners from any of the towns affected by this trail. Your current process of adopting this resolution continues to ignore those most affected. You have had no outreach to the abutting landowners. Well-organized and well-funded proponents of the project have abused the public engagement process and have pushed this project through before property owners have been notified about what is going on. This is nothing short of a vaguely disguised land grab by special interest groups. You've had presentations in favor of this proposal. Paul Weiss has made an offer to make a counter-proposal to the town of Cumberland on the plans for electrified rail on this line. He touched on that tonight. Please bring Paul in for a presentation. This railway was purchased during the Baldacci administration. The line from Portland to Lewiston, Auburn is one of the most important in our state. Governor Baldacci knew the value of this railway. This current proposal would remove the railway forever. It would not be an interim use. History tells us that once the tracks are pulled, they almost never get replaced. Once torn up, this line will be legally defined as abandoned. Per court decisions, an abandoned line will revert to abutting property owners. This attempted conversion will result in a massive class action lawsuit and eliminate the potential for any future rail or trail activity. Passenger rail traffic is increasing. Amtrak has set records this year for both ridership and revenue levels. They expect to double ridership nationwide by 2040 with a strong focus on the East Coast. Maine has pledged to reduce its transportation emissions significantly. Clean, fast, electrified rail will transform the region and remove tens of thousands of cars from the road. This can be the start of future expansion north to Montreal. But we need to preserve this rail line to accomplish that. Rail proponents have identified the federal dollars to accomplish how we convert this line to electrified passenger rail in 2 to 3 years and run 20 trips per day between Maine's largest metro areas. New rail line usage offers a vision for our economic and environmental future. While other transportation sectors have been slow to electrify, 75% of all passenger rail transportation takes place on clean electric trains. We do not need yet another divisive project to strain our community. It's common sense. Don't rip up our railroads for recreational trails. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Please.
I'm Betsy Harding, and I live just off Tuttle Road at Cumberland Crossing. I've been a biker for many years, and I've certainly enjoyed being along the Eastern Trail. I have trouble understanding how, well, right now, as I understand it, travel from Portland to Auburn by bus is about $8 a person for the whole trip. And I have trouble understanding how having an electric trail line will be any better for the water quality along the rail corridor. So it seems to me it's better to allow biking traffic that people would want to use both recreationally and to be able to get to work. So I'm in favor of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Sure. Come on up.
Good evening. Doug Mason, 11 Hopes Way. In Mr. Gleason's letter to you in referencing adopting this resolution in support of the rail corridor proposal, he wanted to highlight 5 key points. The fifth and final of these states, it is our understanding that there will be ample opportunities for local input in the design and construction process, particularly with regard to access points and neighborhood and abutter concerns. Reading this prompted me to read the study findings of the community input in Chapter 5 of the Rail Corridor Study. There were over 800 comments, emailed and public. An overwhelming 88% in support of this trail was not unexpected to see. This makes sense because the ones not in support came from the people impacted the most, the abutters. They are the very people that should be heard the loudest because no one else here knows what it is like to live in their houses, see the views out their windows, or enjoy the properties that they own. Just because something doesn't impact me or you doesn't mean that it isn't impacting them. Opportunities for local input addressing abutter concerns does not mean that the abutters' input will ever be implemented to remedy their concerns, especially of potential negative interactions between property owners and their trail users once this gets approval. Impact on abutters should be resolved before the town moves forward on this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Would anyone else like to speak? Sure, come on up.
Good evening, my name is Tony Donovan. I'm not a Cumberland resident. I am the founding member of the Maine Rail Transit Coalition, statewide organization advocating for the use of rail in Maine. I was a member of the RUAC, the Rail Use Advisory Council. I heard this say the process, DOT is reaching out for this process. No, they reached out about 3 years ago. We met right here in this building. The vote was 5 to 5, 2 abstained. 5 rail with trail, we compromised, or rail only. 5 rip up the rail, which is being called interim, just to clarify the outcome of that RUAC, which I was a member of. By the way, Portland and Auburn, the 2 largest cities, Cumberland, and the rail advocates said don't do it.
There's only 7 members on the council. I think you're talking about the vote up to the high school.
Rail Use Advisory Council took place in this building over a series of months?
No, I think it was up to the high school.
Okay, I was a member,
auditorium.
but we'll talk about that later. Okay. Let me see what I got to say tonight. This is Climate Week, if you're not aware of it. Thousands of people and hundreds of groups from around the world are gathering today in New York City. At the opening ceremonies yesterday, the keynote speaker said, today and this week, it's time to think about the crucial decisions and actions we need to start taking right now to leave the world in a better shape. So our theme for this year, this is the keynote speaker speaking, it's time. Because history will judge us 100 years from now. People will say they knew where they were heading. How many warnings from scientists did they need? How many people needed to die in heat waves for them to really believe what was happening? And she went on to say, so this week when we say it's time, that means what we need to do right now to change the direction and get us back on track. Rail advocates around the state have been saying that for years. We say it's time, we say it's train time. The movement by recreational bike, snowmobile, and ATV users to convert main railroads to trails is counterintuitive to what we must be doing. Now let's be clear, you have to know this. There is no such word as interim. Once this valuable railroad transportation infrastructure is removed, it can never be replaced, never be replaced. Not politically, the trails people will make sure of that. Not financially, as once they're up, we will never be able to afford to replace what is there. It'll be prohibitive. Unlike, by the way, the cost of restoring it right now. And it's not physically feasible because if you know how to build rail, you need the rail to build the rail. I could get into those details, but interim is ripping up the rail permanently. Please understand that. The value of this rail corridor, let's talk value. The value of this rail corridor is about $1 million a mile. It's a state asset, about 30 miles long. It's $30 million. Probably worth more, by the way. I'm a commercial realtor. I'm lowballing. That means you're going to rip up a railroad. You're going to advocate, if you vote tonight, to rip up a $30 million state transportation asset. That does not include the other 400 miles around the state this group is also seeking to rip up. You'll hear from trail advocates that we don't need this route as there is another route that can be used that ignores the fact that the other route is a privately owned freight railroad that the state is protecting for that private property owner for the movement of freight. It is a main line between Maine's largest city. That also ignores the fact that this state-owned corridor connects service center communities and has been engineered by the state in the 2011 study for light rail passenger transit using hybrid electric or all-electric train sets to relieve congestions on the roads and highways, address climate change, and build on local service center communities with economically valuable, transit-oriented, walkable communities. The state has this plan. We've hired engineers to refine the plan. We presented it to DOT at the RUAC, and it was ignored. I don't think you even saw it in that plan. We'll present it to you if you'd like to see it. Rail supporters and unfortunately the DOT are relying on a flawed study done by a firm specializing in rail-to-trail conversions. They will say it's sour grapes, that report is the final word. We disagree. They will say it costs too much. We disagree. If anybody's paying attention to Smiling Hill Farm over there in Gorham right now, that 4-mile Main Turnpike expansion, 4 miles, $350 million. The cost to restore this rail line between Portland and Auburn has been estimated at $300 million. 32 miles will include trains, train stations, and a completely new rail track to run, again, hybrid electric or electric trains. And of course, there's federal transportation funding available right now. Portland and Auburn, Maine's 2 largest cities, and members of the RUAC study call for rail with trail design. We have asked Portland's going to have the same discussion in October. Can I make up a little time here?
You can take your 2 minutes for your
Yeah, I
rebuttal.
was interrupted, but thank you. Portland's gonna have the same discussion. Let's wait, back up here and not vote on this tonight, please, we ask. Portland and Auburn are having these discussions, and they are not in favor of removing this railroad infrastructure. And in fact, if you see the report from the Portland member of that RUAC, you will see his recommendations that a rail system be reconstructed. Now, rail with trail. I don't like rail with trail. I want to do rail, but we have compromised. The trails people right now are not compromising. They're saying rip up the rail. Remember what I said, there's no interim about this. Rip up the rail. And I'm done. Save that 2-minute rebuttal for a little later maybe, but thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak as part of public comment? Sure, come on up. Oh, you come next after. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Go.
I didn't. I'm not. Hi, everybody. I'm Annie Whitty. I live in Cumberland on Tuttle Road. I didn't come prepared for this at all. I was sort of thinking we were voting for the trail, and I was actually very supportive of a trail. So my understanding is where it was standing is that these are these steps that are going to happen that then it's going to take a long time to get through the next phases. I just want to add one thing. I live on Twin Brooks. It's private, it's public land. And when I moved there, it was open fields, it was gorgeous. There was no barn, there were no fields, there were no trails. And since this, maybe 25 years, there are trails, there are over, I don't know, maybe 10 fields, there's barns, there's, you know, and I've taken that as a part of our community growing, as a part of activities for children, as a part of family connectivity. And it's never been within my control to, you know, there's mass gatherings I have a problem with, there are huge football reunions and all sorts of things. And it's not my land. It's the town land, and that's the way I've sort of taken it. So I just have to sort of add that. I understand when you're abutting land and how it can affect your home, the value of your property, and everything else. So anyways, I'm supporting the process that we're going through.
Thank you, Annie. Come on up.
Hello, my name is Jacqueline Story, and I live at 25R Shirley Lane. I've been a resident of this town for 29 years, but that's nothing compared to the 5 generations of my family that has been here. When I built my home in 2021, I carefully chose the location for its safety and privacy, knowing that no developments or even houses could be built behind it. Based on the topography of the land, it would be the last house on a dead-end road, a dirt dead-end road, which, yes, there are some of those left in Cumberland. The proposed Rails to Trails project would directly impact that safety as well as disturb the land. I know many people are probably thinking that safety concerns in Cumberland are unjustified. So I will just give you one example of why safety is such a concern for me. One night earlier this month, around 10:30 p.m., an unknown male showed up at my house banging on my door. It was my first time in 30 years in this town that I was concerned for my safety. The only thing that made me feel even like slightly safe at all was knowing that there was only one way off of my property, and it was past several family members' houses. Luckily, the man left, but only to return 15 to 20 minutes later. As a single female, I was now not just concerned for my safety, I was terrified. I decided to wake up neighboring family members who ended up meeting and blocking this man in my driveway to investigate who he was and why he was there. And yes, I said blocking in just so that in case they needed to contact the police, there was no way of him getting out. I immediately started to look up security systems and cameras, as well as self-defense and handgun classes for women. Adding a trail behind my house would significantly increase traffic and further hinder any security and safety, not just for me, but all of the other abutters as well. If safety concerns aren't enough, I'd like to ask you to consider the use of the land for generations. Farming and hunting aren't just family traditions for me. They're actually the roots of what this town was built on. You can look at the farms and fields, you can take a look at the Cumberland Fair, which is going on right now. With the trail so close, it would have a significant negative impact on all of the hunting, farming, gardening on this land that has sustained my family and other members of this town for generations. I honestly debated speaking up tonight, but prepared my remarks just in case, which is why I had reached out to each of you individually. Ultimately, I decided I needed to because I have legitimate concerns, many of which former council member and my aunt, Shirley Story King, has tried to have addressed over the past several years, but they continually have been brushed aside with no answers as of now. I just want to ask you, the council, as you're making your decision tonight, to take into account the long-standing history of the land and the importance of preserving the safety that we've enjoyed for generations. And I'm also concerned about all the costs right now, but that's like not even one of my top priorities to make sure is heard. The way things stand now, I strongly oppose the Rails for Trails project. I urge you to table this indefinitely, or at least consider alternate routes to protect the safety of properties like mine and my neighbors, and to protect the town's long-standing traditions. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thanks, Jackie. Sure, go on up. Good evening, Sarah Russell. I live on Tuttle Road as well. And I also am on the board of the Casco Bay Trail, so I'm clearly representing that side here. And I just wanted to clarify that asking the council to vote on this tonight is, as Annie said earlier, is really a step in the process. It is non-binding. We are voting on a concept that is so far from being reality that there are many steps in the process along the way, including taking into account the abutters' concerns, including figuring out wetlands and where the trail is, how we're going to work with that. So I just think I would encourage us not to shut down this process before it has gone through due process. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Could I ask her one question?
Sure.
Well, maybe it's a question you have.
A clarifying question would be okay.
It's a quick question, and she probably doesn't know the answer, but if butters haven't been included or invited to participate now, at what point in the process will they be? And what guarantees do we have that that will happen? Because we know how government rolls. And as a participant of government, things happen and unintended consequences happen. And so, do you know when? Because I've been at these meetings since the very beginning, and I attended all but one RUAC meeting. When will we know? When will we be invited to the table?
I do think, because Phil's mentioned this at one of his prior presentations, so Phil, I don't know if you want to come up and talk a little bit about your conversations with the DOT around the abutters and the process that they've kind of communicated to you thus far.
I've had many conversations with Maine DOT about this issue. I suggested at one point, could you come down and meet with the abutters early? The answer was a rather brusque but direct. We don't start those kinds of meetings until the project has been approved and funded by the legislature, which is not to say that they're not going to do it. I mean, they have no interest in going to war with anybody. Yes, I mean, the town council could have a meeting with the abutters. I'm always happy to meet with the butters, but, and I'm not gonna say the butter concerns are falling on deaf ears, but I'm not the decision maker. You guys aren't the decision maker on that stuff. I think you have obviously a duty to do what is in the best interests of all of the residents of Cumberland. And I think it would probably be a healthy thing to do to meet with the butters, but you're not the decision makers on, you know, access and abutter concerns. I do think that I'm not being sold a bill of goods by the people at the state. I do think they're not looking for a fight with the butters. They want a consensual process. I think if Matt were here, he could probably talk a little bit more direct, and I don't know, maybe you have something to say, Chris, as well, about, you know, dealings with MDOT on, you know, road projects and other things. My understanding from Matt is, you know, they're good to work with and they're good listeners. Let me make a couple of other comments. I think, you know, we'd all like to see passenger rail from Auburn to Portland and beyond. From everything I know and have heard from experts, I think that's a fantasy. I don't see it happening. I think the expense is astronomical. So I don't mean to diss that possibility. I think it would be nice, but we just don't have the passenger traffic which would support that. Yeah, I think I'll stop there unless anybody has any follow-up questions. Can I just say one more thing? It's easy in these kinds of discussions to lose track of the significance of what we're asking for. The resolution on the table commits the town to nothing. It commits the town, it doesn't commit the town to spend money. It keeps us involved in a process from which we can withdraw at any time. But I think it would be unfortunate to bail out, say, we don't want to hear this, you know, we've had enough, we're not going to play. I think the fact of the matter is that this trail, if it's approved and funded, will go forward in one way or another. It might even go through Cumberland. That corridor is owned by the state. The state can do what it wants to with that land. I have trouble seeing the state doing that, but I think it's within their power. You know, I just think to walk away from this now would be short-sighted, and we would lose, as I've said, a seat at the table. I think we want to be at the table, even if we are skeptical and have questions and have concerns about abutters. I think it's better to be involved in a process like this than to put blinders on and say, we don't want to hear about it, we're not doing it, go away. So I'm going to stop there.
Thank you. Is there anyone that would like to make a final comment before we move into council discussion? Sure.
Bob King. I live on Shirley Lane. On the worst side of my wife for all these years. I think we've heard a lot tonight, and I think most people here would like to at least see you guys meet with the abutters. And, you know, I think, to me, if I look at some past history that the council just made decisions on, in the last month or two, we had a proposal for extended hours up in the middle of town, and you guys pushed that off because you wanted the planning board to get more information and more, you know, of what the process was. I think this is very similar. You know, you're making the decision before you're meeting with some people that are real important in that area and how this is going to affect us. I think, you know, there was a lady, Pete, I think Pete, the first speaker there, Paul, sorry. I'm always good at getting the first letter right. But Paul made a lot of good points, and he's a biker, and that really impresses me, that someone that's a biker that wants, you know, is really more for the rail than not. So I think that's important too. There was a lady that spoke about Twin Brooks being a community center and all that, which I totally agree with. I mean, to me, that's a totally different aspect than what we're talking about. This, you know, Twin Brooks is more used, probably 80% for this community, where this trail is probably going to be 80% used for people outside this community. That's totally different, you know, and that's, to me, that's a big point, you know. I mean, we're talking about a decision that's going to, you know, from what the numbers they're using and everything else they're saying, you know, that's just totally different than Twin Brooks and a totally different type of a butter than what Twin Brooks is. So, again, I think you really, before we step to the table and do this, you need to talk to the abutters and have that, because I think once the state does it, they're gonna have millions of dollars already invested in this thing, and they're not gonna listen to us. I mean, they're really not. I don't have any faith in that happening at all. So, I just really wish you would table this and come down and talk to us, and then if you wanna make a decision, that's fine, but, you know, there's a lot of people down on that 2.6 miles that I think you need to listen to. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yep, come on up.
Hi, my name is Dale Story. I also live on Shirley Lane, and I would concur what Bob just said. I think it would be the prudent thing to do would be to talk to the abutters before acting on any sort of resolution. I realize the resolution isn't binding, but we just heard that MDOT isn't going to talk to any of the abutters until the legislation's approved. Well, maybe a smaller form of government will listen to the abutters before the legislation gets approved. Because once the legislation gets approved, it's going forward whether we like it or not. So I think it would be the prudent thing to do to put this, table this discussion and table it until we could at least talk to the abutters of the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. All right. At this point, I am going to close public discussion unless anyone has a final. Okay. So let's close public discussion on that item, or public comment rather, and move into council discussion. And thank you all for your comments. What's the pulse?
Just
Sure.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. No.
You're next up. Counselor Thorson.
I'm not quite ready to launch into it, but I went through the packet today. It took hours, and I took notes very crazily on sticky notes. So I want to share just like some data that I found, some points, because it's conflicting with a few things that we've heard or just kind of incomplete. The RUAC vote from the document, out of 15 people, 7 supported trail into rail, 5 supported trail with rail, 1 supported rail, and 2 abstained. So indeed, it was not unanimous, and trail into rail and trail with rail were fairly close.
Denise, can you make sure that people understand that that was not a council decision? That
Correct. That was the Rail Use Advisory Committee, Council?
Committee.
Yeah, the committee's recommendation, essentially. I want to also point out that the demographics of those who would use this, according to the study, is predominantly single-family people who make a median of $87,000 a year, typically 45 or greater years old, and 56% have a bachelor's degree. And there is a weak link to Falmouth business, as opposed to a passenger rail, which would serve low to middle income individuals throughout Maine. What else? As far as it not being used, part of the study said that rail would capture 55,730 people who commute to Portland daily for work outside of that 24-mile radius outside of Portland. And it would also capture 1,050 who go from Portland up north to Lewiston, Auburn, or Yarmouth, or other locations above north of Portland. Additionally, what else do we have? On the public comment findings, it mentioned that 800 comments were received in favor. 800 were received, 88% were in favor. However, concurrently at the time, there was a petition to start passenger rail up again, and there were 380 people who filed that petition. And because it was not part of this particular study, it was not included in those public findings. But I think it's important to note that 800 were received with this, but concurrently, there was also 380 people who favored rail. Anything else? Let me see. That's all I have. It's just some facts. Thanks. Yes.
Bailey, did you have a question?
Yes. Just for clarity, and Phil or Sarah, I don't know if one of you can answer this question, but when we're looking at the Cumberland resolution, I just want to, for clarifying for everybody involved in this discussion, it's this whole thing that we're voting on, correct? Or is it, at the bottom it says 2 of these are resolved, so are those exempt, or what is, just for clarity? On the whole thing. Why does it say resolved on the bottom too? Okay. All right. Sorry, it was just a note I made for myself, so wanted to understand.
It's not like the item is resolved.
Resolved,
It's
it's
like,
just
we
like-
are resolved. It's
Okay.
like a very serious verb.
It's like an adjective similar to whereas, right?
Yeah, like if we
in the
were-
format, in the context of this.
Like, it's like
Okay.
UN Security Council language.
I just wanted to clarify.
But it's also, I think it's non-binding, so that's the reason why it's like,
okay,
more nebulous, kind of.
Okay.
We have him
Phil-
at the mic.
Yeah,
for
sorry,
people at
Phil.
home.
The mic would be great. Sorry, Mike, for the folks at home.
Phil.
Huh?
Phil.
Oh, why did I say, I was looking at Mike when I said Phil.
You said
Sorry.
at the mic.
Sorry, at the mic,
been a
yes.
long night.
Phil at the mic.
I think the key paragraph is here, this resolution does not create any financial obligation on the town of Cumberland.
Okay.
I mean, we've said that a number of times,
Yeah.
but it's important that that language be in there.
Okay.
I'll stay in case there are other questions on this, but.
I think that's a good idea.
With like the no, is that allowed?
Sorry, we're we've closed public comment for now. Back to council discussion. Councilor Di Bartolomeo.
Just putting it out there, I'm not interested in doing anything that's going to destroy the current infrastructure that we currently have without a better understanding of what's going to happen in the future. If the interim includes a complete destroy of the track, then I'm not interested. Just want to share that with the council.
I do think, just as a heads up, regardless as to whether or not we adopt the resolution or not, it's a state decision. So they own the track, they get to do, because they own it. So they could, plant tulips down the whole thing, but and we wouldn't have any say over that. That's correct, Chris, right?
Yes.
And I think on that, I'm sort of indifferent, as I understand it. The existing track, and the train guys can correct me if I'm wrong, is of no use. I don't think it gets recycled. I think if there is rail service in there at a later date, it would be on, I assume, a new, more modern track.
One sentence. This is really the council discussion, so.
Track can be restored.
At the microphone, please, if you would, sir. Thank you. Yep.
First of all, I want to thank the council for her comments. Cumberland does have a say in the destruction of the railroad tracks. But this gentleman and most of the trails people, as well intended as they are talking about a plan to present a resolution from every town along this line, and they're doing one at a time, you're next, to go to this commissioner and have the commissioner put a bill in the legislature to remove the tracks. You will be voting tonight in support of removal of Maine's railroad transportation infrastructure. And that track, I will show you our engineer's report, can be restored right now. The track can be restored right now. You say you talk to experts? I'm all done.
Thank you.
I'm an expert.
Sure. Sure. Yep.
Why?
Go for it. Go for it.
Okay, okay. Just a question into the nothing, because we've heard from Paul and the talk of this happening now. This is DOT owns this. If the state has some new idea where they're going to reinstate rail service, passenger rail, that would ultimately be up to them to do, correct?
Correct.
Because they're going to do whatever makes more sense to them. And if Maine is now jumping on board with that, then I imagine the trail wouldn't even be a thing. So my question is, if we have no control over this, why are we doing this? Like, why do we need to adopt a resolution?
Right.
I think that's a great question. I think it's a fair question. I'll share where my thinking is on this. I think that, and this kind of goes to what Phil was talking about from a process perspective. So this is a DOT project, and what happens is largely up to the DOT and, of course, if the state legislature funds this project. If we walk away, and it is totally possible that if we didn't adopt this, that, maybe the 2.7 miles, maybe it just wouldn't be a part of the larger trail corridor. Maybe it would stop and start. That's a possibility. I don't think it's a likely possibility, but from my perspective, I think having a seat at the table during that process is better than not having a seat at the table during that process, because the concerns are real. And we've heard the concerns today from abutters. We've also heard and received dozens of emails of folks that are in favor of this. And so, and there are safety concerns from the people who are in favor of the trail, because some of them, if anyone saw those emails today, have been hit by been hit by cars. Bikers have been hit by cars, so they would like a safe route without cars to be able to commute to Portland. Those are concerns too, right? So we know that there are concerns within the community. There are concerns from abutters. There are concerns from current folks that would like safer passage via bike to Portland. If we don't have a seat at the table, then we can't express any of those. Then we're just kind of walking away from it. That's personally where I am, but I would always rather be a part of the process and be able to advocate for those dialogues to happen rather than not be included in the process, at which place we're totally cut out. That's where I am personally. I don't know if anyone else in the council would like
A
to comment.
follow-up question?
Yeah, go for it.
So if we were to not sign a resolution, that means that we would have no voice in the process? Or actually? Like when DOT does things within, town limits, we wouldn't already have a seat at that table to discuss what's happening in our own town without a resolution?
If we were to table this indefinitely, we are not providing our opinion, and therefore we're not included in those ensuing dialogues that are happening, because they own the land. I mean, they own the trail. And so rather than, hey, Cumberland, we're going to start having these community meetings, we're going to start, this is our plan, they can just do whatever they want because they own it. They already can do whatever they want because they own it.
Right.
And
Does anyone else?
if I could just comment, I agree with that. You've made the point that I've been trying to make better than I'm making it. I think.
Excuse me, I thought this was council.
Yep.
All right.
We'll
Keep going back and forth. We're not doing this the right way.
So, thank you. We did close public comment. Phil also is the person that brought this proposal to us, and traditionally, as part of the Casco Bay Trail Alliance, and traditionally, when we have questions on something, and that's the person that is responsible, we do call them back up frequently if we have questions that we want to be answered. That happens constantly. That is not improper protocol.
He just voiced his opinion, didn't even ask him a question.
And he stopped.
I'm just trying to be helpful on procedure here.
I know, but you're persuading them, that's the problem.
I'm not,
Moving back into council discussion. Phil, thank you. If we do have any other questions for you, we will call you back up to the podium. Is there any other council discussion?
I guess I gotta move this thing ahead. I think it's important that we show direction. There's two things in front of us here this evening. There's the addressing of the abutters' concerns. I have no problem sitting down with a workshop or a neighborhood gathering to take some input from what their concerns are. We are talking about a piece of private property that's not owned by the town, not owned by the abutters. It's a change of use. So I think that as we contemplate change of use, certainly we've seen change of use, or I've seen change of use throughout the community in a number of different areas for a number of different things, and some of them I've supported and some of them I haven't supported. I think that the viability of this existing train line is not going to happen. You know, we can all say that with a minimum amount of repairs, we can get a train up and running on that. That simply just isn't true. There's would be extensive repairs needed to be made, whether it's conversion to a trail or back to passenger freight, even for freight use. When the train tracks were torn up on Commercial Street, that viability of that route really diminished. There was no way of connecting it. And then when the turnstile or turn bridge, and that still isn't the right term, but when the kids set fire to it there in Back Cove, Back Bay, and eliminated the chance to tie into Eastern Prom, it further diminished that rail line. So there's would be a lot of money needed to be spent to convert it back to rail service. And certainly, I'm a strong proponent of a reintroduction of rail service, passenger rail service. Recently, I was up to J Main and noticed the tracks there. The tracks run to Farmington, Lewiston, Auburn. The opportunity for a policy at the state level to return passenger service rail is it's something that's needed. So back to what we have before us tonight is a resolution, adopting a resolution. We can certainly postpone it. I don't favor tabling it, but we can postpone our decision until after we've had a neighborhood meeting. And I think that I would support that. I've been to all the meetings. I've listened to all the testimony that has been given. The stories have certainly made their case about what it was like down there and what they'd like to see it continue to be like. I think there's a lot more other neighborhood people that live on that section of Middle Road that would probably like to express their concerns to us or their ideas or what their vision may be. But I think that, you know, as much as I had hoped to just pass a resolution here this evening, I think that it's, let's have the neighborhood meeting and then let's go back and pass a resolution. And that's not to say that I'm foreordained my decision, because it's a realization that I do want to be part of the ongoing conversation with the state on any level, and so the resolution, I think, is a starting step to make sure that the town retains its position.
Bob, I agree with you about having the town meeting or having a meeting with abutters. I think my concern lies in the fact that I don't think that there's anything we can offer them in that dialogue, right? So it's concerning to me that it's giving this idea of like that dialogue and then what, right? Because we don't control the project in that way. So I worry, and I don't know if you have any thoughts there, I worry that that's jumping down a rabbit hole and taking accountability for something that we're not necessarily part of.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, I think we're just going to be listeners. We don't have.
Which I'm more than happy to do, but I feel like that's giving false, like it's not helping abutters in that way. I don't know.
I think that, regardless of what we end up doing here tonight with resolution, we should have that meeting or multiple meetings, but to your and to Bob's point, to be there as listeners. I think that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Is that we're not saying, oh, like we can make sure, because we can't give any guarantees on what the state is and isn't going to do, but we can at the very least make sure that they're heard, and so then when we interact with the state, we can be able to say, these are the concerns of the abutters in Cumberland, these are the concerns of, non-abutters that, are for or against what's going on, and to the very least, make sure that they have the voice there. But yeah, I think that's what we're offering, is we're listening. And because right now we can't do anything else with this. We can't decide that it is going to be rail. We can't decide that it's going to be rail with trail. We can't decide that it's going to be rail or trail until rail. Like that's, like you said, it's the state's decision. But I'd like for us to get that information, and to, at the very least, if we are still involved in the conversation with the state, be able to come up and say, hey, how do you answer, this list of concerns? And some of those answers are going to be great. Some of those answers are going to be, not so great. And some are going to be, we don't have an answer. But I think we need to be able to be ready regardless of what the state decides to do with the concerns of the citizens on all sides. Some have voiced them today, some voiced, in emails, the countless that Tig spent however many hours responding to, and all. But I'd like to see that, at least one, if not more, meetings over the course of this process. However, that's going to be, who knows how long it's going to be with the state.
Go ahead. Lift the finger. A thought, just throwing it out there. So this resolution combined with other resolutions from other towns potentially is going to be used as basically fuel for a bill, yes, to favor this particular use of it. So my concern is if we are only, taking in one presentation of one option, whereas if, Paul gave us his rail presentation or whatever, then if there are towns that now, this data was from 2017 and 2019 in this study, that was pre-COVID. That was before a lot of, different thoughts about transportation transpired. Things can be different now, I don't know. Towns may have signed these a while back. Maybe they would also want to see the other option. And then, it flips a switch. Hey, we're going toward rail now. Then you have a bunch of rail resolutions that fund or, are put toward a bill for rail that goes to the legislature. So it's like pick a path. Like either way, a resolution is going to be doing something. It isn't us signing for no reason. Like it'll be used for something. And so that's my concern is that, yeah, like we're signing a non-committal piece of paper, but it is sort of committal in that way because here you're saying, whereas conversion to the trail would involve removing the existing tracks and ties and developing a multi-use trail on the former track bed. So like all these things in the resolution are pretty specific. And while they don't bind us to any monetary gift to MDOT, like for now at least, there are things in here that we are committing to basically by signing it. So that's a little bit of apprehension for me because I haven't seen anything from, the opposing viewpoint or a similar viewpoint, like with rail. So,
I would point out that the Rail Use Advisory Committee, that was their function, was to, I mean, they went through that process. They looked at all of that data. All of that data and reports are available for you to look at, but that process did happen. And so I think I'm not sure it's quite fair to say that the data is old from 2017 and 2019, when as part of that process, that information was all taken into account, and those presentations were heard, and the DOT has said that they are going to go down this route and they want municipal input. I think there's also the looking at what we have in front of us and also taking into account what's transpired in the past. I think it's just an important thing to note that there have been conversations going on for quite some time. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a neighborhood meeting, or we shouldn't meet with abutters or anything along those lines, or shouldn't meet with the folks that are in favor of it as well. Because, certainly there's been a lot of dialogue both tonight as well as in the dozens and dozens of emails we received today. I think my concern still goes to, it's a state project. The state can do what they want with it. They own it. And I listening to what kind of Bailey mentioned about to what end, I think that absolutely, we can sit down and have those dialogues. We've heard the concerns tonight. I know that Phil reached out proactively to meet with the abutters as well. But at what?
I didn't get reached out. No.
But at what point are we belaboring something that we don't have any control over, whereas there is the opportunity, I think, to have that seat, have those dialogues, document those dialogues in tandem. We also don't know what the plan is from the DOT yet, because they have said, of course, that there is this process that's going to happen, but we haven't given them the opportunity to do their work yet, and I think that that's an important note as well. So, other comments? Mike?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've heard a couple things tonight. One is, this resolution doesn't bind us to anything. Yes, it does. That is the biggest, I don't know what kind of fairy tale it is when you say that this is not going to bind us. Let's remember what happened, because I was on the council, Bob was on the council. The last time we voted to bring this project forward for more study, less than 1 week later, the Rail to Trail Committee was lying in the press of what this council supported. Absolutely came out and lied. And not Phil, he's a good man, but his predecessor came here and got in the press and lied and said the Cumberland Council is in support of this. Outright lied. They don't have a good track record. DOT is going to have us at the table. Who are we kidding? DOT has had 3 years to bring the abutters to the table and hasn't done it. Where they been? They don't want to hear us. We all heard from the former town manager, that when he was up there, he advocated to put abutters on the committee and was shot down, not allowing him. So it's all of a sudden they're not going to have this epiphany and say, oh, let's put abutters on. That's not going to happen. If we vote tonight to support this, we are voting saying we want this trail. I heard tonight someone mention the Rise getting an extra hour. And we know that probably 90% of our community would vote in favor of that, and this council voted not to support that or not to bring it forward. We're going to look at other options. We're going to wait for the new comprehensive study to come out, all this other stuff. You have, on the restaurant on Main Street, you have a couple of butters on each side that are against extended hours. And I listened to one counselor in particular this past winter to say, until you get the abutters on board, I'm not on board. You've got 2.6 miles of abutters who are not in favor of this thing. When is the last time we threw 3 miles of abutters under the bus? And that's what we're gonna do if we vote in favor of this tonight. We're gonna throw them under the bus, and then we're gonna back up and run them over again. This is I drove down the interstate tonight, and I patrolled out there for 16 years. We had more people that weren't supposed to be out in those trails, homeless people doing encampments. We were constantly throwing them off of the interstate. When you drive down the interstate, you see a nice buffer of woods between 295 and the railroad tracks. On the Middle Road side, what do you see? Lawns that go right down to the railroad tracks. There's no buffer of woods. It's lawns, it's people's houses, and who in the world would want to see thousands of people every day walking in their backyard? You know, wasn't the people from Tuttle Road in favor of this? Let's put this on Tuttle Road. I don't want to see it. I don't want the results of it. It's going to have unattended expenses. We're going to have to go out there for rescue calls with no access. I listened to, talk tonight, possible access on Powell Road. Yeah, so when Story Brothers come out with their pickup trucks, they're going to have to go around cars parked on the side of the road because there's no parking down there. There is no space down there for additional parking, maybe a couple cars in the grass. But once you get more than 2 cars, they're going to be out on the road that they use to access with their equipment and dump trucks. This is a good want. It's not a need. You can't be against trails. But what they're asking, the rail-to-trail people is asking, throw your neighbors under the bus for this project so we can ride our bike from Portland up to Auburn. But you guys won't have any access. There'll be no commercial, there'll be no economic advantage to this. Just go ahead and throw your neighbors under this. So I think you know where I stand on this, and I am not throwing 2.6 miles of my neighbors under the bus. Thank you.
I thought just Powell Road is not by Story Brothers.
What's that?
Powell Road is off of 88.
No. Powell Road ran,
I've got it between 1 and 88.
no, Tiggett,
Is this the wrong map?
no, it does Tig, but the old Powell Road is the one that runs into Story Brothers.
Oh, it's on the other side of 295.
Yeah, it was cut off when they built the interstate back in the 60s.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Haber Street?
yes.
Got it, thank you. Well, Google Maps should make some updates. Thank you. Other council comments? Councilor Douglas.
Can I ask Phil another question? Sir Phil?
Back to the mic, Phil.
So say we vote on a resolution, what are next steps look like from your perspective?
Well, I'm fully support meeting with the butters.
No, I'm saying like in the order of operations, like what say you
happens
get
next with
approval
the
tonight,
state?
what happens? Yeah.
Nothing's going to happen until after the election, and probably until the first legislative session in January.
Okay.
It depends on how the Transportation Committee is populated, and we won't know that until we find out who has been elected and, what leadership is. So I think there is some hope that this will start to unfold in 2025, but there are no guarantees. It could be 2026, 2027. I don't think anything is going to happen in a hurry, but we really don't know.
Thank you.
Other council discussion, thoughts?
I think we take no action this evening. I think that there's enough questions that are on the members of the council, and pending a neighborhood meeting workshop.
Didn't we have a workshop, though? In June?
We did.
Which was open to the public?
Refresh my memory.
It was on June
Yeah.
18th?
Yeah, we did. There was a workshop.
Can we do another with this new council? Because that was before we were elected.
Was that our first one?
No, that was your
No,
first
that- you
meeting.
Yeah,
were
we
elected.
were
Yeah.
on the
When was
11th.
I elected? I know, I remember the Rise neighborhood meeting.
No, it was.
I don't remember this.
It was the first meeting that you had as a new counselor. Because Phil and I just talked about that, actually.
With a,
Yeah, June 18th.
I guess
we talked with Phil, I don't remember neighbors.
I would struggle to just understand, like, another neighborhood meeting, great. We listen to the abutters, which I think is totally a valuable use of time. However, what does that change in this dialogue?
And just to clarify, it was not a neighborhood meeting, it was a workshop, but all
Yeah.
workshops are open to the public.
And maybe that's an overly direct question, but what does that change in the dialogue? In the sense of, like, what are the takeaways from that? Because I have a strong understanding of what abutters want, or based on the dialogue from the few that I've heard from. I have an understanding of what I read and received today online. I have an understanding of the project from Phil and Sarah. I have my kind of stance on it. So what is the information gathering that folks are expecting from a neighborhood meeting to help make your decision?
Are you gonna
Counselor
say something?
Thorson.
Mine, I do have a really good idea of abutters' concerns, and I went to your website, Shirley, like, I've read all this stuff. My main thing right now for me is I was led to believe there was no other viable option, and it was either leave it as is or it becomes a trail. So if now there is the potential to, sign something to lobby the state and whoever happens to be, elected in November for a rail option, I would like to see a rail presentation to assess that viability of, electric passenger service. That's sweet. Like, if that is an actual option that is on the table but requires support of the towns that those rails are within, I would like to see more about that. Like, I can't make a decision on Rise without enough data for, 2 hours of opening, like you said, Mike. But I'm going to make a decision that could potentially impact the ability for Maine to have electric rail service to Portland, based on one presentation. And, reading through the however 100 pages of this, council document that I read today, yeah, in a vacuum, sure. But if there is another alternative, I need to have that.
I would say that the Rise example, that's zoning that we control, because it's our zoning.
I understand that.
And any state, again, the state owns it. We don't own it. The state determines what happens with that land. If you wanted to engage in that process, I would suggest meeting with your state legislatures to have those dialogues with them about rail, because that's outside of our purview.
Is not this then at the same time? This will be used to lobby. This is what this is. So I don't feel comfortable signing my name on something that's going to be used for that if, this is what this is. That's what it's going to be used for.
That's fine. It's something that the DOT has asked for the input on. We don't know, of course, because no one has a crystal ball, what's going to happen in November. We don't know if rail on that particular line is going to come back up. It may not. And so all I'm saying is that we've been asked to do some action on this tonight. Maybe that means we don't act on it. But I would also just make sure that we have a clear separation of kind of church and state in terms of the rise zoning, which we control because it's within our power of ordinance to do so, whereas ultimately, if it becomes electric rail or trail until rail, that does lie with the state, and we certainly can have a voice as, people that live in the state, but it's not our larger purview.
And that's not what I meant by that. I'm just explaining my own thought process and how I gather data and how I make informed decisions. And for me, I need more in order to put my name on a paper, which I don't think you'll need my name, but I'm saying like that's where I am right now, and I wanted to explain that.
Great.
So that's what I did.
Yeah, please, Mike.
Tig, you're 100% right in that we can't tell the state what to do with their own land. But we don't have to be an accomplice in this. We don't have to be an accomplice of putting this in the backyard of our neighbors. We can come out and send them a clear message that the abutters are our number one concern. And by not voting for this resolution, that's the message we send to the DOT and to the rail to trail people, that our abutters, you have not listened to them, you haven't asked for their input, we're not happy with it. Get them on board, and you'll get us on board. That's the voice that we can lend, and we just don't need to be an accomplice to a project that's going to invade their backyards. So, thank you.
And maybe there's some world in which we could amend this resolution, not tonight, but to put those concerns of the abutters within here and in the legalese, resolved that the state sits down to hear the concerns of the abutters of the property. I mean, we could always look to add some language in there to make it more powerful, just another idea. Councilor Magoon.
Do we know the likelihood of getting somebody from the state down here to talk to us? I mean, I know that they said that they're not going to engage with voters until whatever, but, as we're looking at this, it would be great to hear from the state on what their thinking is, the thought, the planning, the timing, sort of to somebody's point of, I think yours, Bailey, like what's next? Where are they in the process? What does that process look like going forward? All just to hear, from the state, and so we getting as close to the horse's mouth as we can.
No.
Madam Chair, when you're ready, I have a motion for you.
Is there any other council discussion before we hear a motion?
One more, I know you're probably sick of me, but I have a thing. I was looking at the original one that was done. Oh gosh, where is it? One second. The original, the one like basically the resolution to endorse like the formation of the Rail Advisory Council had said, whereas to ensure the rights of Cumberland residents and abutters are thoroughly considered and respected as part of this process, it may be worthwhile for the town of Cumberland to learn more about and practically be involved in the membership of any council. And one of them, it was a precondition that there would be a town councilor on it, not the town manager who would become the chair. So the, adding whereases and things in it, I don't know if that would be effective, is what I'm saying, because there are already some whereases that weren't followed. So that would be my concern with that. Just amending the language, how far that would basically take us. So not very helpful, but pointing that out at least, that did exist at one point in the language.
Madam Chair, may I speak?
There was a motion on the table. I'd like to keep public comment closed at this point. There is a motion on the table, Mike, or did you want to make a motion?
Yes.
Unless there's any further.
I would, keeping in mind the discussion tonight around neighborhood meetings. Madam Chair, I move to table item 24-102.
I second that.
Going to need a reminder on the protocol for tabling and discussion, because I think that after, Bob, I'm looking at you. You're not allowed to discuss after,
Discussion ended with the second. It now has to be voted on.
okay, there is a motion and a second to table. All, oh, I don't think.
Is there a
we're-
point of, can I ask a point of
I
clarification,
think so.
Bob? With the table, can we ask if this is tabling indefinitely or tabling until a certain, until the next meeting or till,
We would have to,
2
someone would have to
months.
make a motion to take it off the table, and then we would have to vote to take it off the table.
okay. So a future meeting, we'd have to
future
vote to
meeting,
untable it.
Yes, untable it. I
Or-
don't know how that works with the scheduling of a workshop. If one were to be able to schedule a workshop on a tabled item, I think we would have to vote to take it off the table and then schedule a workshop.
Okay, thank you.
Take a vote.
Call for a vote then. All those in favor of tabling? All those opposed? Motion fails. Back to discussion.
Let's try a different tack, Mike. Let's propose a neighborhood meeting. I think Bailey has certainly articulated well. Nobody in that corridor is going to say, I want a trail in my backyard. Probably they don't want a freight train or a passenger train in their backyard either, given, the dynamics of what their first choice might be. They might just like to see it, like anybody. If I had vacant land in my backyard, I'd like it to remain vacant. And I would think that, maybe, the benevolence of the guy that owned it might say, well, I'll leave it vacant, Bob, until you die. So, there's a lot of differences of opinion of what people might like to see. But I think the value of us sitting down with the abutters to that is I think that's our duty. So I'm not sure we want to use the word table. I might suggest that we use the word postpone. I would move that we postpone a decision this evening until after a neighborhood meeting.
Bob, I would just remind you that these people on Middle Road have been living with a train for 100-plus years. So they know about the freight trains, they know about trains. That's not an issue. The issue is people walking back and forth all day long in sight of, right out their back windows, and the potential for serious consequences coming off that trail. That's what it's about. So
I don't think
I
anybody's, I
support-
don't think anybody's suggesting otherwise, Mike.
I support, if we can't table it, then I certainly support postponing it. Do you want another motion?
No, yes, I would though just like to ask Phil if we were to have a workshop or neighborhood meeting with the abutting families, because we're not running this project, right? And so I would want to make sure that any outcomes of that meeting are then disseminated to DOT directly, right? Because otherwise, the reality is that we're not the voice in this. We are a stakeholder in this, and we are, representatives. But what assurances would we have that, hey, we have this workshop with the abutters? How are we able to, or is there, would you be the liaison to communicate said concerns to the DOT, or would that fall back on us? What would be kind of that process so that if we have this meeting, when we have this meeting, we're codifying all of those concerns and then taking them directly to the source rather than having a meeting, but then, this project gets legs. If it does get legs in 2 years' time, we've had this meeting, but they haven't been communicated. That would be my concern. At the mic, do you mind, please?
I would like to address the council after, please.
I think the ask at this point should come from you. I asked a while back, as I told the story earlier, and was emphatically told, we don't do that, but, I'm just a guy. You're the council, and, you should contact the DOT and see what they say.
And you do have a person at the DOT who's been sort of the liaison so far.
Yes.
If I'm remembering the
Yes.
presentation
Yeah.
correctly.
I'll-
Okay,
I'll-
great.
I'll get
I
it
just
to
want to
you.
make sure that we have a plan so that once we do this meeting, if we are going to do this vote, we are able to document concerns and then take them directly to the source rather than not having an outcome that has clear next steps.
And I would suggest that before you try and schedule a meeting with these folks, you have that conversation, so,
With the DOT.
you don't get people all ready to go and nobody comes from the DOT, so.
Okay, thank you. I don't work with the DOT on a regular basis, obviously.
Nor do I.
So.
Madam Chair, that's something that we can facilitate and reach
Okay.
out and see what we can shake out of this to get into a meeting.
Okay, great. That would be great.
I would move that we postpone said decision this evening on resolution pending a meeting with the abutters of the railroad.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Point of clarification. If I want to amend, do I need to wait for the second to amend that motion? Or can I offer the amendment before the motion is seconded?
The motion's been made, you can amend.
Okay, I would just amend to add that meeting with the abutters and the DOT. Just adding the and the DOT aspect to it.
Typically, we would vote on the amendment, and then we would vote on the original motion, but I'm happy to take the amended motion and take it to the floor.
We are taking the amended motion to the floor.
Yes.
Okay. Is everyone clear on what the amended motion is? Okay. There is a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second, if I'm
Okay.
able to.
There's a motion and the second. I will call for a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, 6-1, motion carries. Councilor Story King, please.
No longer.
It's okay.
Retired.
It's okay.
I would just like to observe that the comments and the questions the council has are all evidence as to reasons why you should not have signed this declaration tonight. You don't know what you don't know. You've heard one side of the story. You gave preference to my colleague, friend, whatever, Phil Gleason, who I have tremendous respect for, and he and I have talked, and my relatives didn't hear because they were away for the weekend, or Phil was away, or I was away, or they were away. So it just didn't happen because it was a gorgeous summer. So I'll take some of the blame for them not talking to Phil. But if you had done your homework, one thing you would know that until the 1980s, and the RUAC knows this too, and they're pretending that they don't. Until the 1980s, when rails were abandoned, they had to go back to the property owners. And in 1980, there was federal legislation that mandated that states could then take the land and use them for trail. They cannot do with them whatever they want. They can return them to the landowner or turn them into a trail, or run their own railroad, or whatever. They can use them for rails or trails. They can't do whatever they want with them. So that's, just another component of evidence that, I implore you to know what you're signing and to be informed and educated about this. And that's all I'm asking. I'm asking for you to give us equal representation at the mic. Thank you.
All right, moving right along. Legislation and policy. Item 24-103, to hold a public hearing to consider and act on the renewal of a graveyard/junkyard permit for Cumberland Salvage.
Cow, where is this? Jeez.
It's like 164 or something,
Page 94,
94,
yeah.
from the packet I didn't read. According to Counselor Story King.
I knew it
I
was.
have a question in there. If
About
we're-
the
permit.
About the permit? Yeah, go for it.
In the application where it said, are there any, what did it say, like freshwater, like wetlands? It wasn't like a yes or no question, it was how far away is the nearest wetland? It was just like NA, but I know there's like a body of water nearby, because it's, a
I think
lake
it's
slash pond.
highlighted in the diagram.
so- Okay, so I wasn't sure if NA
That's
was
just the
like an
aquifer.
acceptable answer, if there actually needs to be a measurement, like footage
Not
away from
applicable.
water.
Different though, right?
Can I,
Yeah, sure.
And this is like a
Denise-
renewal, essentially. I mean, they've been doing this for a long
and
time.
Denise, just to let you know,
Body of water.
up until a couple of years ago, there were numerous test pits around that because of contamination, which was not related to the junkyard.
Yeah.
But there was a constant monitoring of water around there, and up until what, Chris, a few years ago,
Oh, 5 years ago.
4 or 5 years ago, they stopped because the tests kept coming back good.
Okay.
And I, but you wouldn't, a lot of people wouldn't know that,
Yeah.
but we had numerous, I mean,
Yeah, there was nothing to do with the junkyard, though. It was someone contaminated a well with dry cleaning fluid.
MDOT.
So yeah, I just wasn't sure if NA was an acceptable answer since it was asking for like a distance. So it's fine. And my computer doesn't work, so I can't pull it up to show where it was, but yeah.
It was number 14, and yeah, it just says NA
Okay.
for
On page
nearest body of
97.
water or freshwater wetland.
Yeah, on page 97, question 14.
And I looked at the wetland map and there didn't look like there was anything on that side of Route 100, just the lake, but yeah.
Which presumably means that there's no wetlands close by.
It did say freshwater body, I'm pretty sure, but again, like, blame my internet. I don't have the wording.
Because if you go to page, I guess it's 100, you can see where the aquifer boundary is.
I think that gets into the semantics of, does an aquifer count as a body of water? And, definition, because aquifer would be under the ground, and,
And this one
usually when
is,
you
yeah.
say body of water, that's
Yep.
above ground.
I do understand this to be an annual application, and there have not been any concerns from the code enforcement officer on this. So I think it's pretty airtight. Chris, that's a fair assessment, right?
Yeah, the application is complete, and staff is recommending approval.
There's a motion, I would love to hear it.
Right here, I move to authorize the renewal of a graveyard junkyard permit for Cumberland Salvage.
Second.
So motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Call for a vote. All those in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Yippee. Okay. Okay, 24-104, to consider and act on forwarding to the planning board for a public hearing and a recommendation amendments to Chapter 250, Subdivision of Land, Appendix A, Subdivision Review Process and Flowchart, Appendix B, Application for Major or Minor Subdivisions, and Appendix E, Conservation Subdivision Application Submission Requirements and Checklist of the Cumberland Code of Ordinances as recommended by the Ordinance Committee. My understanding of this item as being at the former ordinance meeting before I punt over to our ordinance chair is that it was necessary to make it much more clear on the applications, how the process works for conservation subdivisions for those applicants. Our amazing new town planner in her project management expertise sort of recognized that it wasn't very clear to the people making the applications. So she added a flow chart and adjusted the wording so that it's very, very clear to the applicant what they are required to do as part of their application. Is that a decent tee-up, Mr. Ordinance Chair?
I think you did a wonderful job.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I'll take that compliment.
The background, or a little bit of the background, is a few years ago, we identified agricultural land in the community, and coming out of that was the importance of preserving that land, and so one of the ordinance changes was to go with a conservation subdivision ordinance so that lands that are agricultural in nature are preserved. So this really is is more housekeeping, and because it just articulates that you must file a conservation subdivision application. So that's really it.
Any public comment on this issue? Nope. Okay, I will close public comment. Any further council discussion? Well, I just want to say, well done, Bridget. I think it's a great addition. Is there a motion on the table?
I'll give you a motion. To consider and act on forwarding to the planning board for a public hearing and recommendation amendments to Chapter 250 Subdivision of Land, Appendix A, Subdivision Review Process and Flowchart, Appendix B, Application for Major or Minor Subdivisions, and Appendix E, Conservation Subdivision Application Submission Requirement and Checklist of the Cumberland Code of Ordinances as recommended by the Ordinance Committee.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Woo-hoo. All right. Okay. Okay. 24-105, to consider and act on authorizing the town manager to enter into a labor contract agreement with the Teamsters Local Union number 340 for the Cumberland Fire Department for the period of July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2027. After getting a note from our esteemed town manager earlier today, he said that there were some questions from the Teamsters attorney, and he would like a few more weeks of runway to get those resolved before it comes forth for council action. So as such, recommended that we table until the October 7th meeting. I would take a motion to table if that would be up, unless, as we learned, anyone wants to talk about this before we table it. No, okay, all right, I guess we're not gonna talk about it. Is there a motion?
I'll give you a motion for 24-105 to consider and act on authorizing.
To table.
To table. Do you want me to say table before or after?
Maybe to table
To
24-105?
24-105, and then do you want me to read the whole paragraph?
And 106 too?
Nope,
No, just
106
105.
we're acting on.
Thank you.
So, I'll give you a motion to table 24-105 to consider an act on authorizing the town manager to enter into a labor contract agreement with the Teamsters Local Union number 340 for the Cumberland Fire Department for the period of July 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2027.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, we'll give that one to Mr. Eads. All right, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Okay, great. October 7th it is. All right, 24-106, to consider and act on authorizing the town manager to enter into a labor contract agreement with the Cumberland Police Benevolent Association for the period of July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2027. Okay,
This isn't the
we have the information in an email that came separately from our packet, but I think we recall that Mr. Sturgis has been working hard with the union.
Can I have a question?
Please.
Chris, I know this has been, the CBA expired July 1. Is retro in discussion?
Yes.
Thanks. My town computer was down all week. I'm picking up a new one tomorrow, so I didn't get the emails.
Yeah, no, we'll retro back.
Thank you.
Yep.
For those of us that are not in the police world, would you tell me what that means, basically? Is it retroactive pay
CBA,
based on?
CBA is the collective bargaining agreement.
I knew that part, but so because it expired, is it retroactive payment based on whenever
Most
it?
places, because they would have paid anyway. Let's just say they had a contract and it was a 3% raise.
Yep.
But they did it before the expiration date.
Yep.
It'd already be in effect. And what they said is they took more time to negotiate, came up with an agreement, and the 3% or whatever the raise would be July
Yep.
1 would have gone into effect July 1. But they're basically going to get paid back whatever percentage that first year raises to July 1.
That's a lovely thing. Take care of your people, just because your negotiating takes a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So we gave them the same raise that the rest of the employees received as was budgeted. And they will get retro pay if it was, let's say we did 5% and they're going up to 7%.
Got it.
So we'd give them that extra 2%.
3 months.
Good to know. Other discussion on the CBA? See, I'm learning, guys. Tough crowd.
So I read through the whole thing. 10, 4, and 4 is the pay raise. 10% first year, 4% the second, and 4% the third year. It's very hard to criticize the Cumberland Police Department on any level. They do a great job. They're genuinely nice people. I think the part that I have a little bit of discomfort with is the turnover rate. And I think that it's expected in a community like this to have turnover rate because, a young man wants a challenge, so he wants a career path, and it's difficult to find a career path in such a small department. I know we're going to talk about a resolution with the town of Falmouth here next month, and the part of discussion for me is that we have to find a way to provide for our community security, but we have to also find savings in how we do that. And the only way that I think we can do that is to an expansion of the police department into a multi-community police department. I'm not saying that we should be going to county, but certainly county should be coming to us with some options, and I'd like to see us explore avenues of greater efficiencies.
Can I make a comment?
Please.
Bob would never miss an opportunity to talk about regionalization. Like, honestly, has nothing to do with what we're doing right now, but you just figured a way to circle it back, so thanks for that.
Madam Chair, I move, I would like to make a motion to move and authorize the town manager to enter into a labor contract agreement with the Cumberland Police Benevolent Association for the period of July 1, 2024 through June 30th, 2027.
I'll second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. I am so sorry. Would anyone from the public like to comment on this? Just checking, just checking. All right, we have a motion and a second, no public comment. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. The police are getting paid. Okay, great. Next up. Okay, oh, public hearing time. All right. Next up is 24-108. Yes, 24-108, to set a public hearing date of October 7th to consider and act on the adoption of the Maine Municipal Association Model General Assistance Ordinance and appendices for A through H for the period of October 1st through September 30th, 2025. And this is again to set a public hearing on the GA, which we do every year.
Question?
Yes,
on that?
please.
So the public hearing and the action on it is in the same meeting? Is that what this is saying?
Yes.
Okay. I know when I was reading through it, it was talking about like, don't use these numbers automatically. Figure out what's best for your town. Like, is that something we do in the interim leading up to that? Is that something that town manager handles? How does that work?
My feeling would be that we would discuss that, like you could kind of discuss that at that moment if you had other ideas, but also in the lead up to that, we could, if you wanted to ask Chris and Matt to what their thoughts were on those particular numbers. I mean, 70% of those expenditures are reimbursed, right, Chris?
Correct.
Is it typical, do you know that we've done kind of in the past?
We usually get the appendices forwarded to us, and it's the recommendation from the Maine Municipal, and it's usually just we usually accept it. It's what they have for heating assistance, what
Yep.
what the allocations are gonna be this year, what they're willing to reimburse.
I did check in that the numbers are every year adjusted for like cost of living increases, inflation, more, Helene's nodding, so that means I got something right on a number.
Yes, everything.
Market trends, maybe, all of that. But yeah, I mean, I think that if you wanted some additional like benchmarking, that's a totally reasonable thing to ask for, and we can have a robust conversation about it during our public hearing on October 7th.
I think it had lumped it in by, I don't know, like 5 cities that surround us as kind of that like group. So I'm not sure if, that's like a decent sample size, I guess, for figuring out cost of living and that kind of stuff for people, so.
It lumps us in with basically Greater Portland.
Yeah.
As a Greater Portland metro area. Some acronym, it's the HMFA, which stands for something, but they don't call what that is. But effectively Greater Portland.
I have a question.
Please.
Why are we classed under Portland and not Cumberland County?
Sounds like a question for Chris Bolduc.
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure.
And then
We'd have to get back to you on that.
in my other notes, I had said confirming we should follow the Portland HMFA through the memo versus Cumberland County, because from a grammatical standpoint, there's a lot of errors in this report, but I'm not here to correct people's grammar and or consistency.
Oh, go
so
ahead. Just do
there's a
it.
lot. There's a lot of things, which it was a little surprising, but
You should read a newspaper every day.
I was a little surprised by it, but here we are. So just wanted some clarity on that.
I think if you look through all the other towns, we're surrounded by other towns that are.
I figured that was what, but then there's like reference to Cumberland City versus Cumberland County, and there's not any Cumberland City. So there's just like some things that I would. There is, it's noted in here. I noticed it.
City of Cumberland, right?
Yeah, did you see it?
Apparently it's a city.
It's a city now, okay. I think we need to have 15,000 people to be a city.
So just out of curiosity.
We will sift through all that and have everything ready for you for the public
Thank you.
hearing.
Sounds good.
Someone's gonna have to let MMA know that they had some errors in here.
Page,
Grammarly is free.
it is free, Grammarly is free. Page 137, exhibit metropolitan FMR areas, Cumberland City.
That's abbreviation for county, the CTY.
Oh, okay,
Is that what you're
thank
reading?
God. I was like, wow. Must not, I was really concerned.
Abbreviation before, that's good.
Okay, that makes me feel a
That's
little bit
my
better.
guess, at
Because I
least.
was like very concerned. Okay,
Yeah, because you have Penobscot
Yeah.
County down there, York County.
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's very inconsistent. Okay, all right, thanks. Otherwise, I'll give you a motion.
Here for it.
24-108, to set a public hearing date of October 7th to consider and act on the adoption of the Maine Municipal Association Model General Assistance Ordinance and Appendices A through H for the period of October 1st, 2024 through September 30th, 2025.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Just, Chris, sort of to Mike's comment, this would, because we're not going to be doing anything until the 7th, and this is starting from the 1st, this would all be retro, like backdated for anything that happened between the 1st and the 7th?
For the general assistance,
Yeah.
that wouldn't be retro.
So we go from when we adopt as opposed to when the period for the appendices that the state is sending us.
Yeah, it's when we adopt it.
Okay.
Yes. We wouldn't retro back, and I thought it was for a set start period. That's what I was trying to find, actually.
I mean, it says for the, in effect from October 1st, but if we're meeting on the 7th,
Right. So technically, yes, it would retro back.
okay, thank you.
It would be on the date wouldn't be on the date you approved it, would be on the date that it states in the documents.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay, I will call for a vote. All those in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Okay,
What notes did I have on this?
all right. We got one more. 24-109, to set a public hearing date of October 7th to consider and act on amendments to Chapter 96, Fires and Fire Protection, Article 2, Fire Protection of the Cumberland Code of Ordinances as recommended by the Planning Board. Sounds like it's the night of public hearings on October 7th.
Okay.
My understanding is this is also a bit of housekeeping that we have to do kind of per the planning board.
Two comments.
Yes, please, what are your comments?
Page 248, should we note Peter Bingham as Peter Bingham Senior for clerical purposes? And then page 96, or page 249, should we remove 96-9 Article C altogether?
Why don't I have page numbers?
She's using PDF number.
Yeah.
Here, do you want to look?
See that teeny tiny little thing in the corner? I think that's your page number. Gotta get a magnifying glass to see it.
Yeah, that ain't gonna work.
I don't have Peter Bingham on page 246.
248.
That's what we call being
Just-
hard of hearing.
Clarifying that it's senior, and then on the next page, 96-9C, better facilitate the needs of updating to removing volunteer fire department responses. It just no longer serves a purpose, so I wondered why we just don't remove it altogether, since it's referencing volunteer fire departments and not other services we provide, but just two things I noticed, which we can discuss on that date if we want.
This would just be, it's just removing volunteers, so it's just the fire department's response, like the whole purpose of this.
Do you think it's for that, though?
Bailey, what was the other page number?
249, I just wondered if we should remove 96-9 Article C altogether, since it's in reference to volunteer fire department responses and no longer serves a purpose. Because then the whole sentence is curated around volunteer fire department. That was just another clerical thing, but it's either way, it's just something I noticed.
Was that changed to remove volunteer because we don't really have any more volunteers? So they were
No,
just,
we do have volunteers.
then why remove
Technically,
volunteer?
no.
They're really not.
They're all paid, so we really don't have any volunteers. We have a call company and a full-time company, but since they're paid, they're not really classified as volunteers.
I live next to a he calls himself a volunteer, so, sorry, they still call themselves volunteers, but they're not
Yeah, I
technically
mean,
They're really
volunteers.
getting paid.
They get paid.
I'm not trying to downplay it, they do give a lot of it.
It was just
Yeah,
a
okay.
question.
They're all
I don't know
paid.
the answer. It doesn't need to be removed. It was just something I noticed.
I mean, we're all volunteers up here, so,
Or we get paid.
I mean,
Technically.
probably not as much as the fire department does, but I think we could also, we could maybe check in with the planning board on that too, if we want, or in the lead up to that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Peter Bingham Senior.
Just a thought. I
think it's a
mean,
great
from
thought.
a historical perspective, who are we referencing? Just a thought. It would be, if they didn't both were involved, it wouldn't matter, but that's just a thought.
I think that anything we can be doing to make ordinances more readable is a good thing, right? And to make them more digestible, because sometimes you can feel like you're mired down in legalese, like the earlier dialogue we had about being resolved and whereas and all of those things, right? So, yeah, let's see what we can do. Would it be kind of the best step, Chris, to just maybe one of us reaches out to Peter on that, or Bridget, maybe?
I would say Bridget.
Bridget, all right. We'll go to Bridget, our hero. We already know from earlier tonight that she's really good at making our forms and processes simpler, so maybe she can help out with this.
We will speak the same language.
Love it. All right, well, I would is there a motion?
I will give you a motion.
All right, let's
Move
hear it.
24-109 to set a public hearing date of October 7th to consider and act on amendments to Chapter 96, Fires and Fire Protection, Article 2, Fire Protection of the Cumberland Code of Ordinances as recommended by the Planning Board.
I'll second.
Great, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, I will call for a vote. All those in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Okey dokey, moving on to new business. Mr. Eads.
No, I just, for those going to the fair this week, enjoy.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. Anyways, it just reminds me so much of a kid just going to the fair, and it's still hard for me to go and not sneak underneath the fence.
Love it.
Just can't do it anymore.
I just, even when I was working, when I was with the
Don't
PD
fit.
or the state, and we'd go up, I just look at that fence and go, there used to be a hole right there. Bob, you probably crawled under there a few times as well. But no, that's all I have, Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Magoon?
I have nothing tonight.
Okay. Ms. Douglas?
Mrs.
Mrs. Douglas?
I'm just kidding, Tig. Just thanks, Mike, for my pass.
You got it.
That's it.
Anytime, Billy.
Mr. Vail?
A public thank you to Tig and Bailey for dinner the other night after returning home from my mother-in-law's funeral. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We like you. Sometimes. Is that it? Counselor Thorson, we love you. You know it. Counselor Thorson.
Kill you.
On the subject of glyphosate to treat the knotweed, a little bit of Google foo pulled, a couple other alternatives that are not as carcinogenic or carcinogenic at all. So I would like to Mike left, but I wanted to ask him if maybe he had, talked to the committee and looked at what's available, because knotweed can die in different ways. You can also take really concentrated vinegar and it'll do the same thing with injections. So something to bring up, I'll email him or something. And then, I know it's been a lot, but Paul has multiple times said that he would happily give us a presentation about statewide rail stuff that's potentially happening. So I don't know if we want to take him up on that and give him the opportunity to give us a presentation or not some night, but something to think about perhaps. I'd like to learn more. But yeah, that's all I have.
The other Paul Larrabee, and this is part of my thing, but we're doing our Ryan's Forest walk. He can talk to you a lot about the glyphosate as well, because I do believe he uses a severely watered down version of it. But that would be, you could get straight from the source on October 5th. Counselor DiBartolomeo.
All I want to say is, in light of us approving the labor contract tonight for the police department, I just want to give a big thank you to all of our police officers that work for us. We have a class act. They're top notch, and I appreciate everything they do for us.
Here, here.
That's it.
That's it. Okie dokie. Just reiterating what Chris and Whitney had going on. We've got the October 8th new resident orientation from 6 to 8. I would highly encourage those of us that can be there to be there. Universal Waste is on October 12th. Confidential Shredding is on October 19th. The crier has all of the accepted items and the unaccepted items, although I don't think they're really looking at what you're confidentially shredding, so you're probably okay there. And again, October 5th, 9 a.m., Ryan's Forest walkthrough to look at the invasives with our amazing forester, Paul Larrabee, and the Lands and Conservation Commission. And thank you to everyone who came out tonight. I know these conversations are really hard and really emotional, and everyone feels everything, and that is all fine. But what hurts my heart is that at the end of the day, we are all neighbors, and we have difficult conversations, and I think that that's a good thing, even though it feels really, really hard in the moment. So thank you, everyone who showed up tonight and shared their opinion. That also takes a lot of courage to do. And thank you to all of the folks that wrote in their emails. We will listen to this and have another meeting and digest and move forward as we should. I will stop talking now because everyone wants to go home. I would take a motion to adjourn.
Mike.
Want to stay forever?
Well, I think Bob just made it, and I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Woohoo! Happy Monday.